Hi everyone. I still remember the night everything changed. The way the city lights flickered outside our apartment window. The distant hum of traffic below. The faint sound of jazz playing from a neighbor's open balcony. Chicago never really slept. But that night, I felt like the only person awake in the entire city. For months, things had been different between Emily and me. First, I ignored it. I told myself it was just a phase. People go through rough patches, right? She had been coming home later, always blaming work. She was tired. She had headaches. She started going to the gym more often, claiming she wanted to focus on herself. And of course, she was always on her phone. It was subtle at first, but over time, it became painfully obvious. I should have confronted her sooner. Maybe deep down, I already knew the truth. But that night, I didn't have to wonder anymore. Emily sat me down on the couch, her fingers wrapping around my hands. And for the first time in months, she smiled. A warm, radiant smile. The kind I used to see every day. "I've been thinking," she said softly, squeezing my fingers just a little. "I want to have a baby, just like that." No warning, no build-up, just a casual, offhand statement like she was suggesting we adopt a dog. The baby. For months, she had barely touched me. Now, suddenly she wanted a child. My stomach twisted into a knot so tight I could barely breathe. Something was off. I forced a smile, though my throat felt dry. "That's a surprise," I said, choosing my words carefully. Her expression lit up, as if she'd been waiting for this moment. "I know we haven't talked about it much, but I feel like it's the right time. We've been married long enough, we have a stable life. And I don't know, I just feel ready." Her voice was too controlled. Her excitement too rehearsed. I studied her face, searching for something real beneath the carefully placed words. And then she made a mistake. It was small, barely noticeable. Her hand moved to her stomach. A soft, almost unconscious gesture, like she was reassuring herself of something. That's when I knew. She wasn't asking to have a baby. She already had one. And I wasn't the father. I felt my pulse quicken, but I forced myself to stay calm. My mind was racing, trying to piece everything together. Yet, outwardly, I kept my expression neutral. "That's amazing news," I said, my own voice sounding distant. Emily's eyes flickered for just a second, like she was analyzing my reaction. But then she smiled again, squeezing my hand. "I knew you'd be happy," she said softly. I nodded, though inside I felt like I was suffocating. I needed time to think. But instead, I pulled her into a hug, hiding my face against her shoulder as my thoughts spiraled. Who was it? How long had this been going on? And how had I been so blind? The next few days passed in a blur. Emily suddenly became more affectionate, more present, as if trying to erase the months of coldness between us. She sent me little texts during the day, asking about my schedule, suggesting dinner plans, things she hadn't done in a long time. She talked about baby names, mentioned nursery colors, even started following pregnancy blogs. On the surface, it looked like she was trying to reconnect. But to me, it felt like she was overcompensating. The more she tried, the more my suspicion grew. I started paying closer attention, watching for inconsistencies, tracking her movements. She still went to the gym religiously, still had those late-night work meetings. But now, I noticed the details. The way she kept her phone tilted away from me. The way she hesitated before answering certain questions. The way her smile would falter for a fraction of a second when I mentioned the baby. Then, one evening, I found the proof I needed. Emily had left her laptop open on the kitchen counter while she was in the shower. She rarely did that. Usually, she was careful, meticulous. But that night, maybe she let her guard down. Maybe she thought I had already gone to bed. Either way, I couldn't ignore the opportunity in front of me. My hands were shaking as I clicked into her emails. I wasn't even sure what I was expecting. But when I saw his name, I knew. Ryan. A name I didn't recognize. A name I had never heard her mention before. But the messages were unmistakable. "I miss you. I can't wait to see you again. I dream about you every night." And then, the final dagger to my chest, one email sent just a week ago. I took the test. It's positive. A cold numbness spread through me. My vision blurred as I stared at the screen. I barely registered the sound of the shower turning off down the hall. My body felt frozen. My breath shallow. I closed the laptop just as Emily stepped into the room. A towel wrapped around her hair. Her face soft and unsuspecting. "Hey," she said with a sleepy smile. "Why are you still up?" I looked at her. The woman I had spent the last 8 years of my life with. The woman I thought I knew. And for the first time, I saw a stranger. I forced a smile, swallowing the bitterness rising in my throat. "Just couldn't sleep," I muttered, my voice even. Emily walked past me, completely unaware of the storm raging inside me, and poured herself a glass of water. She was humming softly, relaxed, like everything was perfectly normal. I watched her. Every movement, every detail. How long had she been lying to me? How many times had she come home after being with him? Kissed me like nothing had happened. Slept next to me without a shred of guilt. For the next few days, I acted like nothing had changed. It was the hardest thing I had ever done. Every time she touched me, I wanted to pull away. Every time she spoke, I wanted to lash out. But I needed more than just anger. I needed to understand. So I started digging. I checked her phone whenever she left it unattended, looking for more messages, more pieces of the puzzle. I searched our bank statements, her calendar, even small details like Uber receipts. And the more I found, the worse it got. She had been meeting Ryan for months. Hotel bookings, restaurant reservations, even a weekend trip that she had disguised as a work conference. She had built an entire second life, and I had been too blind to see it. Then one night she made a mistake. Emily had told me she'd be out late, saying she was catching up with an old college friend. I pretended not to care. Just nodded and went about my evening. But I wasn't gonna sit around and wait this time. I had already made a plan. I got in my car and drove across the city, following the location I had pulled from one of her Uber receipts. I wasn't even sure what I was going to do when I got there, but I had to see it for myself. The address led me to a small boutique hotel near the Riverwalk. My stomach tightened. This wasn't just dinner. This wasn't just drinks. I parked down the street, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. And then, as if the universe wanted to make sure I suffered as much as possible, I saw her. She stepped out of the hotel lobby, laughing, her hand brushing against his arm. Ryan was tall, athletic, with an easy confidence that made my stomach churn. He leaned in close, whispering something in her ear, and she smiled, really smiled. The kind of smile I hadn't seen in months. Something inside me snapped. I wasn't even thinking when I stepped out of my car and started walking toward them. My heart was pounding, my breath shallow. I had imagined this moment 1,000 times, had played out different scenarios in my head, but nothing prepared me for the real thing. Emily looked up and saw me. Her entire body went rigid, her face draining of color. Ryan turned, confused, but I wasn't looking at him. "Jason," she breathed, taking a step back like she had just seen a ghost. I stopped a few feet away. My jaw clenched so tight it hurt. "Don't stop on my account," I said. My voice calm, controlled, dangerously so. "Go on, laugh," whisper in his ear. "Pretend I don't exist, just like you have for the last few months." She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Ryan glanced between us, clearly realizing what was happening. "Look man, I don't know what." "Shut up." I cut him off, finally turning to face him. My voice was quiet, but the way he flinched told me I didn't need to yell. He knew exactly who I was. Emily stepped in between us, her hands up. "Jason, please not here. Let's talk somewhere private." I let out a humorless laugh, shaking my head. "Now you want privacy? After parading around town with him like I'm some idiot who wouldn't notice." She looked around nervously, like she was worried someone would see. But I didn't care anymore. I was done playing the fool. "You lied to me," I continued, my voice cold. "You lied to my face over and over again. And now you want to talk. Jason, please?" She pleaded, but I was already backing away. I turned to Ryan one last time. "You can have her," I said. "But I hope you know if she could do this to me, she'll do it to you too." Then I walked away, leaving them standing there in stunned silence. I walked away without looking back, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it would break through my ribs. The cold Chicago air bit at my skin, but I barely felt it. My mind was racing, my emotions a tangled mess of fury, betrayal, and a strange sense of relief. It was over. No more pretending. No more wondering. No more hoping she'd somehow turn back into the woman I once knew. By the time I reached my car, my hands were still shaking. I leaned against the door, taking a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I should have felt shattered. I should have felt destroyed. But instead I just felt numb, like I had already mourned this relationship long before tonight. I got in the car, but I didn't drive home. There was no point. Home wasn't home anymore. Instead, I pulled into a parking lot near the lake, staring out at the dark water. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. Emily. I let it ring. Then another message. Please talk to me. I turned the phone over, blocking out the screen. I had nothing left to say. The next morning I didn't go back to our apartment. I went straight to my lawyer's office instead. The meeting was brief. I had already gathered everything I needed. Bank records. Proof of her affair. Copies of the emails. My lawyer looked over the documents and nodded. This will be enough, he said simply. Are you sure you want to move forward with the divorce? I exhaled slowly. Yeah, I'm sure. It was surreal, sitting there, officially ending a marriage that had once felt unbreakable. But as I signed the first set of papers, I realized something. The pain wasn't unbearable. The grief wasn't crushing. It was just there. A dull ache. Nothing more. Emily called 3 more times that day. I didn't answer. She sent messages. Long ones. Apologies. Excuses. Desperate attempts to explain. I didn't read them, because in the end, none of it mattered. 2 weeks later, I packed my things and moved out of our apartment. I didn't tell Emily where I was going. She didn't deserve to know. The last time I saw her was in the lawyer's office, when she finally accepted that there was no fixing what she had broken. She looked tired, worn down, maybe even regretful. But regret wasn't enough. She tried to speak as I walked past her. But I didn't stop. I didn't even look at her. For the first time in months, I finally felt free.